Okay, a cool trick here I find, I do this a lot with my verbs depending on what I'm working on and how much time I have to work on it. But imaging reverbs and putting tape saturations and doing stuff to reverbs, I find it's pretty easy to mix and just like set up your reverbs and send things to it and then that's it. And I find they can be like mucky sometimes, or they can like they can benefit from more definition or some cleanup or stuff like that. And a cool trick I could usually do is just print them into audio, either like all the separate verbs. I only have two in this section in this session for now, but I usually end up having like 11 or 12, and either printing them all into one stem and then mixing them some more. Or what I tend to do is I have this one bus here called the all verbs bus. So all my reverbs will be routing to that one bus. Well, and that depends how you're routing your session. You know, it might not be the most practical thing. And for stemming, it's not maybe not the best. But for this, you know, if I want to listen to my session without verbs, all I got to do is mute this one channel here. But what's interesting about this is it sort of gives me another it gives me more control over like the just the verbs of the session. And the first thing I do on this bus, I always have ozone vintage tape on it. I find this sort of at its basic setup, I find this opens up the verb a little bit. Well, it's as soon as you put this on something, I find it gets a little bit of depth and gets it just cleans up some of the lower mid stuff, unless you push some bias or you play around with the IPX. So, you know, if we let's see. You know, it's a small difference. So with the harmonics on like pushed to the max here, you can sort of hear the verbs getting a bit richer and more complex, as opposed to being a bit too, well, not necessarily in this case, but often I find verbs can sound a bit too plasticky or too like digital. So doing some saturation harmonic stuff to it can help it you know, sometimes I want a denser verb, I want a more open verb, I want a more complex verb, whatever. So that sort of helps. Just like it does something to all my verbs. So when I have 12 and a whole and like 100 tracks, some of them going through verb, when I push the whole thing through this plugin here and do a little bit of cleanup on the verb and maybe do a high pass or something because I got too much low information going through it, it can help my whole session in like a quick move, you know. So it's like one of thousands of moves that will, I find, help get a step closer to a cleaner, more open mix, or an nastier mix, however you want to do it. Another thing I like doing on this bus sometimes, now I'd rather, since this is a pretty simple session, I've only got piano and clarinet, and it's an improvisation, so I just want to sort of get an ambient set up quickly for now. So I might image all my verbs. Now I prefer to print them into audio tracks and then do some mixing, because it's, well, if I have a big session, I have less real-time processing, and I can sort of disable all this stuff, and I can treat it's easier for me to treat all the verbs to different instruments separately, as opposed to doing the treatment for everybody at the same time. I might not want to do that specific treatment for like the drum verb or for some like the piano verb, but maybe for clarinet, you know. But what I can do is solo clarinet, print all these verbs, drop them beside my clarinet, reopen them, like close my sends, then just let the piano go through it, then mix my piano and mix my piano verb, and then just mix my clarinet verb. But anyways, back to the images. You know, if I turn this on, you know, all of a sudden I can just do another step at opening my reverbs. So I cleaned up some bottom end stuff, which I'm actually not sending piano to verb, so that's not a problem for this session, but I might eventually just do a little bit. Now, if I clean up all the bottom stuff, especially when piano is in that, we're going to keep, you know, it's just going to be a bit cleaner, less confused. I've got my tape thing that's sort of making my two verbs a bit more complex, a bit more rich if I want to with the harmonics. And then I can do something that just spreads it a bit more, you know. And I find that cool because if I have, for example, a wide piano, if I'm trying to get a super wide, big piano sound, well, my verb just like sort of hides behind it, and it can get messy pretty quick. But now if I image it and I try to go past and maybe shrink my piano a bit, I actually get some, maybe can go find more depth out of it this way. But yeah, this is just a quick way to get like all my verbs to sound a little bit better, I find, and not have to do like mixing on every tracks, especially when I have 11, 12 verbs in a session and I just want to open the whole thing in one shot. Sort of as my master bus, I'll do like a bit of tape saturation to glue thing. I'll do like a bit of openness, some bus amps, limiter, everything on my master for the whole tune. Well, I'll just do that to my reverbs as well. Now, I dropped my output here because like as I push the imaging, I get a bit of volume from it. I get some. Another thing that's cool in this session, I want the piano to be rich, and I want the clarinet to stay in front. It is pretty dynamic, so I don't want to be compressing too much. And I want the clarinet to be very clear and focused, but I also want it to have a lot of space behind it. So I want to manage all these things pretty well, and this ducking is actually helpful, and I do it really subtly. But I'm sending my clarinet on this to this compressor as a sidechain on this master bus, ducking the ranges that'll interfere. And I'm not doing much. This is 1 dB, 1.08 dBs of ducking when he's like digging in. Again, it's a subtle move, but the more I do like these little moves, the more I create a bit of separation, or I can make sure I can identify pieces better and not have everything leak, just glue too much into each other. Now, the issue with that is obviously too much separation makes might create a mix that's not working together. But then afterwards, I can go back to stuff like my master bus and do like a summing amp and then re-glue everything together. I try to get 3D and then make it work together, then 3D, then texture the whole thing together. So I can do a lot with this all verbs bus, especially ducking. Again, if I duck on this all verbs, I'll be ducking my reverbs for all of the instruments. So I'm probably not going to do this all the time. If ever I've got a vocal or something like that and I want to do a ducking trick, I might just print the vocals into one stereo track once I've automated the vocals to make sure my reverb levels follow. Print that track, bring it beside my vocals, and then do this trick just to that audio track of the vocal verb. And that also makes it that once you print the verbs, if you do that, it's like an extra step. And if I end up doing it for a lot of instrument, it makes for an easier like stemming session after, because I can just either send them all through groups and stem it in one shot, or I'm just not stuck with all my session verbs into one fader here. So if I want to do like 12 stems in one shot, I don't have my reverbs with everything in it, or unless I want to do that. Anyways, it's enough on that.